Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here, welcoming you back to the channel once again as I bring you all another big fat installment of historical gaming goodness. This time out we're going to be looking at one of the most reviled games in recent memory as I finally complete my quest to do a retrospective on every single Golden Axe game ever made. Yes, it's time to bite the bullet and analyse the red-headed stepchild of the franchise that appears to have acted as the franchise's death sentence. That's right folks, I've forced myself to take a deep dive look into this monstrosity, so you lot don't have to. So without further ado, let's cover the Golden Axe game that not only nobody actually wanted, but the fans of the franchise would completely disown. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the problematic and infuriating story of Golden Axe Beast Rider, the title that killed the franchise. Yeah! Although sadly it has long been seemingly resigned to the dustbin of gaming history, along with so many other of Sega's beloved IPs, in the late 80s and early 90s Golden Axe was one of the most recognisable, one of the most enduring and one of the most ubiquitous franchises out there. This was during Sega's boom and by far their most successful period, and a lot of stock was put into the medieval fantasy themed games by the Japanese gaming giants. The Golden Axe franchise had received heavy support from the arcades as well as Sega's 8 and 16-bit platforms. There were numerous ports with additional handheld side games and an early 32-bit Saturn release. There was no doubt Golden Axe was one of Sega's heavy hitters and biggest money earners. That's why it was a bit of a surprise that 1994's arcade fighting game Golden Axe The Duel would be the last that we would see of the once oh so popular franchise for almost 14 whole years, other than the absolutely horrendous Japanese exclusive Golden Axe Remaster, which was part of the Sega Ages collection of course. But we should all just do our very best to forget about that one. Still, if you are somewhat of a masochist and want to learn more, I covered that abomination a few months ago too. In regards to Golden Axe Fall from Grace, looking back, it seems to be mainly due to Sega's own doing. It seems that many of the franchise's failings are a result of Sega's classic balmy decision making that have caused the series to lay dormant after slipping into obscurity post the 16-bit era. Perhaps if more effort had been put into the, let's be honest, lackluster Golden Axe 3, or if they'd ever bothered to actually give the glorious Revenge of Death Adder a home port, things may well have been completely different. But the poorly promoted and ultimately overlooked The Duel would signal the end of Sega's love affair with the Conan the Barbarian inspired franchise, at least for the time being. 2004 saw Sega hire former LucasArts president and owner of a tremendous winning smile, Simon Jeffrey, as their new CEO for Sega of America. This hiring coincided with the former console kings bowing out gracefully from the hardware market after the bitterly disappointing failure of the Dreamcast and transitioning into an exclusively software-based company. They were also now looking to refresh and reboot several of their older franchises and characters for current consoles, with modern graphics and in line with modern sensibilities to appeal to a new fresh audience. This was cause for celebration for Golden Axe fans, as their favourite hack and slash was one of the prime candidates for reboot consideration, with the elusive franchise looking to be one of the titles Jeffrey and Sega wanted to focus on the most. 2005 would see the next chapter of the story begin to unfold as Sega entered into a partnership with young fledgling San Francisco based studio Secret Level, who were fairly inexperienced at the time, with their credits being exclusively limited to ports rather than any actual titles of their own. As Secret Level had an already existing relationship with Simon Jeffrey due to their time together at LucasArts, they attempted to use this leverage to pitch an idea for a new open-world Golden Axe game, incorporating their own game engine that they had domestically been working on. As this new engine was able to render massively expansive landscapes, the original idea was for it to be a completely sandbox style game, with players able to roam wherever they choose, picking missions from various locations a la Grand Theft Auto and whatnot. Sega were absolutely gung-ho on this idea, as the incredibly novel, creative, and not at all cynical plan of plagiarising the immensely popular GTA series was right in line with how Sega planned to gain more traction in the Western market. Secret Level was under a huge amount of pressure, however, as although Sega was satisfied with the prototypes of the game's engine that they had seen, the studio were massively behind schedule, and a little overwhelmed with the amount of work required for a game of this magnitude, which they had totally underestimated, the silly buggers. They had promised massive, expansive and explorable areas, a huge variety of quests, and an emphasis on beast riding, hence the really clever name, with supposedly dozens of mountable creatures to choose from. The already troubled studio were due to show a new, further along build of the game in the spring of 2006, but there were still issues with the design of the main character, and how she would interact with the environment at that point. Although the new build looked fairly graphically impressive and was technically proficient, there was one rather huge drawback, and that was that it was still nothing close to being actually playable. Incredibly, Sega saw enough in what was on display to be happy with how the project was progressing, and let Secret Level continue as they were. What's even more incredible, however, is that soon after, Sega of America actually made the puzzling decision to invest $15 million into purchasing the company outright, despite objections from many directors and executives within Sega itself, despite the fact that they were still yet to receive a game of their own, and despite the fact that the project they were currently working on was fraught with problems. Did Secret Design's bosom buddy relationship with their super duper BFF Simon Jeffrey have anything to do with this? Is nepotism as rife within gaming as it is in every major entertainment field? Well, what do you bloody think? The newly minted Secret Design Studios would be tasked with expanding their operations considerably when Sega offloaded their freshly acquired Iron Man license onto them. This would put even further strain on the development of the new Golden Axe game, as despite all of the new resources and the studio being split into two large teams, the pressure of having the Iron Man game finished in time to coincide with the imminent release of the movie it was based on, meant that more manpower was having to be put into the production of the Marvel IP, with a significant amount of time being taken away from Beast Rider. Things were looking a bit rough for the future of the new Golden Axe game, almost as rough coincidentally as the hideous character models for Robert Downey Jr. in the aforementioned Iron Man game. It was clear that things would have to be scaled back considerably on the Golden Axe development front. Despite the fact that the main selling point of the game was the sandbox aspect, and the idea that it could be like a medieval GTA, the decision was made to cut all open world aspects of the game, including all quests and the vast majority of the supposed dozens of rideable beasts. To add insult to injury, there would now be absolutely no multiplayer whatsoever, and only one singular selectable character in the form of series favourite, Tyrus Flare, with everyone else being relegated to the role of lowly NPC. So essentially the only reason the game got greenlit in the first place is now gone, and two of the biggest, most distinguishing features that would make it identifiable as Golden Axe were being removed completely. What a bloody mess. It can't really be understated how big a part of the experience the choices of characters and multiplayer aspects of the original Golden Axe games were, and still are. Having a mainline entry in the franchise without these elements would be like having a Pokemon game with no battles, a Tetris game with no blocks, or a FIFA game that actually advanced the series in any conceivable way. The intention at Secret Level was always to have Tyrus Flare as the focal point of the game, even though there was originally meant to be 3 selectable characters, as they thought Axe Battler may seem too much like Kratos from the God of War games, which were particularly relevant at the time, and they didn't think Gileath Thunderhead was a strong enough character to carry the brand. The decision was made early on to focus the story and promotion around the female lead. Now knowing all of this, they clearly thought Gileath wasn't tall enough for a main event push, brother. Simon Jeffrey McMahon was happy with all the other playable characters to be scrapped, as it meant the team could focus their entire efforts on getting Tyrus's look, performance and animations all bang on. Unfortunately, as seems to be the theme with this game, this too was fraught with problems, as huge issues with the mocap sessions meant literally months of work had to be scrapped, leaving the troubled, delayed and issue-ridden game even further behind in its schedule. In a desperate attempt to salvage what looked likely to be a dying project, several junior staff members were released to make way for a number of more experienced, proven and savvy developers and engineers to hopefully ensure that things actually got finished, which was looking more and more like an eventuality that might never happen. The dreaded cancelled word was thrown around quite a bit at this juncture, but Sega's persistence and open wallet meant things never became quite that fatal. The release of Iron Man to schedule in time with the movie actually meant good news for Beast Rider, as more hours and manpower could now be put into the project to ensure completion. But the terrible critical scores and fan backlash the Iron Man game received after it came out didn't exactly bode well or inspire much optimism for the upcoming Golden Axe reboot. Beast Rider finally apologetically limped onto store shelves with a sad little whimper in October of 2008 for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 consoles, to a thoroughly predictable wave of poor reviews, player apathy and disappointing sales. What a surprise to absolutely bloody no one. Critics called out the poor design and mediocre gameplay, while fans rightly lambasted the ridiculous lack of multiplayer, with everyone seeming to universally be in agreement that the game itself was a slap in the face to fans of the franchise. It currently has a somewhat laughable Metacritic score of 45, which could actually be considered a little generous, but there were some reviewers that inexplicably scored it higher than it really had any rights to be on release. Perhaps they were particularly chummy with Simon Jeffrey. Players hack, chop, burn and slice their way through the various levels in the most violent way imaginable, which is the main reason it was given an 18+ and mature rating. Unfortunately, but again, surprising absolutely no one, the game is chock full of bugs and glitches that just scream poor production, and the combat, which is obviously incredibly integral to the experience, simply feels like a chore from the off, and is no way fun, entertaining or satisfying. There is a small positive to note, as fans of screen tearing and frame rate dips will be absolutely in their element here, as they are rife and almost constant throughout. What a joy! The lack of variation in environments is a clear sign of the shoddy development process the game went through, and the bland, repetitive levels just feel like you're repeating the same areas over and over again, like you're stuck in some sort of Conan the Barbarian limbo. Sega themselves were fully aware that they'd put out a big smelly turd. In an interview with Computer and Video Games magazine, Sega executive Mike Hayes said, "We need to deliver a good product. In some instances, we've done that. Look back at when we did Sega Rally. It scored well and was moderately successful. But then with other great franchises like Golden Axe, we didn't produce a great game at all." Aside from veering so far away from both what made Golden Axe great, but also what made the series distinct and recognisable, Beast Rider's main issue is that it is just so horrendously uninspired. A lot of 7th gen games suffer from this problem, but the dull colours, drab environments, and gameplay that is nothing more than a mediocre example of what we've seen ad nauseum with this console generation, give little justification for anyone to actually ever pick up and play this abomination, even if you are a massive fan of the series. In all honesty, being a massive fan of a series would probably be even more reason to steer clear of the game, given that it takes such liberties with the source material. It practically takes a big dump on it. Sega seems to take note of all of this, as by mid-2009, less than 8 months after it was released, Golden Axe Beast Rider became a budget title, available for a fraction of the cost of a lot of much older or downloadable games. Its poor reputation had preceded it, and no one wanted to play the thing. In a strange twist, The returning Death Adder character, who serves as the main antagonist and final boss, is voiced by the late great James Avery, who graciously found enough time in between battling Ninja Turtles and admonishing Will and Carlton to grace this depressing little game with his much welcomed presence. Cheers, Uncle Phil. A nice addition and fun novelty indeed, but hardly enough to warrant subjecting yourself to this drivel. After one more movie-based Iron Man sequel, which actually has a lower Metacritic score than the first game, Secret Level, who had bizarrely been renamed Sega Studios San Francisco at some point in the interim, had the plug pulled on them, had all resources cut, and were no more. Sadly, after the damage to the Golden Axe name that Beast Rider had done, it made it look incredibly unlikely that we'd ever see a further iteration in the series. Beast Rider essentially killed the whole franchise off. It was that bad. Hopefully, though, the success of Streets of Rage 4 proved to Sega that new life can tastefully be blown into these old school beat 'em up franchises. So I guess there is a chance that one day Golden Axe may get another chance at the rodeo. Let's pray next time though that they finally get it right. With regards to Beast Rider bringing Golden Axe back, it seems it was a rather sad case of be careful what you wish for, as the Golden Axe game that fans had yearned and craved for so many years turned out to be the thing that for now ultimately put the final nail in its coffin. It's certainly not outside the realms of possibility that we'll see another game set in Sega's Golden Axe universe in the future, but given how much negativity is now associated with the franchise after Beast Rider's abject failure, if there is ever a new Golden Axe project, they certainly won't be looking to create something in the style of Grand Theft Auto again. So ladies and gentlemen, that was the story of Golden Axe Beast Rider, the Golden Axe game that for now at least seems to have killed the entire franchise. It has been fun going back through time and covering the existence of every single Golden Axe game ever made. This was a franchise with awesome beginnings, some interesting paradigm shifts in gameplay, and of course some hilariously abysmal reboots. Whether you consider it a good thing or a bad thing, there is no denying that Golden Axe has it all, with the original game in the series still being remembered as an all-time great right up until this very day. If you are new here, do not forget to like this video, subscribe, and ring that notification bell, as I upload at least 2 new videos like this to the channel every week. It also may float your boat looking at some of my other movie-length episodes, whereby we go back and look at the release of every game from a particular franchise. Personally, I'd highly recommend my coverage of Double Dragon or Streets of Rage. Videos like this are in part made possible due to the generous support I receive via Patreon. This means I don't have to spend all of my time chasing views and instead can focus on lesser told chapters of gaming history. Speaking of those who helped me in such a capacity, special shoutouts go out to A Murder of Crows, Carl Johnson, Heo Paulo Lopez, Nostalgia Collector, Ben Harradine, Corey Almar Sr., Rowan Dinched, Evan Boulder, Philip Mamph, Azra Arkai, Joaquin Varela, Michael Calix, Ego, Jordan Durant, Ian Boyle, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of the Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Johnny Holly, August Piazza, Justin Wang, Capcom vs SNK, Hermes Gonzalez, Man Shovel, Michael Hall, Sang Hee, Norma Stitz, Langston Miller, Noob, Sarah Powell, Flaming Renee, Marvin Araliga, TOG Driver, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Ball, Chris Fix, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Since Spaces, Punk Toast, and everybody else who backs me on the Patreon platform. Big Daddy Top Hat, thanks you all very much. Cheerio.